So I've been threatening to do this segment for quite a while, and I'm going to talk about Hollow Earth for probably the next 20 minutes. Hollow Earth is one of these topics. It's very divisive, even in the paranormal community, because we have all grown up to think that the Earth is a solid, round mass, and that the only things underneath the ground are dead bodies, dinosaur bones, maybe some oil, magma, and the Earth's core is somewhere down there. But it's pretty much solid, is what they say. But if you go back in time and possibly even learn about some of the ancient cultures and civilizations that predate us, thousands of years ago, maybe even 5,000 to 10,000 years ago, there are different stories that come about when it comes to the origins of mankind and us, humans in general. Now, last year I talked about Hollow Earth and some of the weird things that happened, some of the old stories about a giant cataclysm that took place that drove people from the north to the south. Also referenced the race of little people, the pygmies that fought storks or cranes, and their stories about those entities or beings throughout many cultures of this planet. Now, when it comes to what I'm going to talk about and some of the clips I'm going to play, this is coming from a movie that does have a Christian slant. It's done by the same company who produced the movie where they accuse aliens of being demons in disguise. It's the same company, but this documentary is not as heavily focused on like biblical reinterpretations of old tales. They're just saying, hey, here's some information we found out about Hollow Earth. Let's have some fun with it. And this first little clip here is about Native Americans and what they grew up learning about their origins and what they've learned. Here we go. Just a little segment about Native Americans and Hollow Earth.
Among the Native American peoples, the Navajo legends teach that the forerunners of man came from beneath the earth. The ancient ones had supernatural powers, but they were driven from their caverns by a great flood. Once on the surface of Earth, they passed on their great knowledge to the human race, before once again returning to their great sanctuary back inside the earth.
Among my people, we have a saying that it's in the time of the Guacara Hagua. And Guacara means in the ancient times of the caves. And there was one very specific cave, the cave of the Jagua, or the Hagua.
Well, I thought it was a starter at the Mexican place.
This is the cave where, according to our stories, we emerged from. We came out of this cave after there was a cataclysmic flood that covered the land. And from there, we also see a lot of motifs of my tribes of spirals. And those are stories of the migration routes that we took when we came out of the cave. The underworld of our people, very similar to the Cherokee stories, the Creek stories, the Maya Incan stories of underwater panther and these underworlds where there was completely different civilizations that lived under there. I don't know of any stories of how we got there because our creation story starts with being created from the earth. The Creator made us from the dust of the earth. But when that happened, who knows? We don't have a timetable on that. But at some point, we went from being on the surface to being underground. There's also stories, this is a personal story that was told by my grandfather and grandmother. And he's the one who shared a lot of these traditional stories with me. But this is more modern and more recent. There's a place on our home island of Boriquen in Puerto Rico called Arecibo. And Arecibo is where the SETI project is working through. And it's a huge array of satellites. It was built, obviously during my grandfather's time. I don't know when it was built exactly. But the purpose for it is being used now for the search for extraterrestrial life. And my grandfather in those days, when the military had control of this area, I don't know if the military has control now, but he would always, when he was young, he would go canoeing across the waters near this area. When he met my grandmother, he wanted to take her canoeing one night. And so my grandmother, being the voice of wisdom, she said, "No, we can't go there. It's cordoned off now. The military has control of it." And my grandfather was also a chief. He was a cacique, a very respected man, and had no fear of anybody, including the military. And he basically said, "I don't care. I want to go for a canoe ride, with my bride." So they got in the canoe and they went out across the lake. And there was a point where they were on the lake, and the soldiers started yelling at them from the encampment to get out of the water. They were shining spotlights on them and everything. So my grandfather started to turn around, and he said it was very heated. You got to get out. And so he's paddling out, and he said that from underneath the surface of the water there was a light, and the light got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so he started paddling even more so. And my grandmother's like, "Get us off this water! Get us off this water!" And right before they almost got to the shore, and the soldiers are yelling at them, this disc came flying out of the water and just into the sky. And my grandfather said it headed towards the Seven Sisters, which the Pleiades.
Now, this guy goes into additional stories about paranormal encounters and Hollow Earth. But this documentary is about 2.5 hours long, packed full of these weird little stories about the origins of Hollow Earth. It goes into where some of these entrances are, and it goes into detail about, there's entrances in South America. It also goes into what may be below the surface. It is possibly, if there is Hollow Earth, there is a race down there, and they are ruled by the Underworld King, and the Underworld King has access to a vast array of technology. The technology that was developed above the surface, and then after the cataclysm, all that good technology taken below the surface so they could survive, while all of us up here were toiling around during the Great Flood and left to pick up the pieces afterwards, and developing pretty much a parallel civilization above ground, while they had all the goodies like, iPhones and iPads down there. And, they didn't have specifically iPads, but some pretty high-tech stuff down there. Now,
it's interesting. Steely Eels had the exact same idea I had while I was over there getting my coffee ready for tomorrow.
What's that?
Have we talked about Hollow Earth connecting to the deep underground military bases? Could that be part of it? There
is... I wasn't going to play this clip, but there is a person that is on in this documentary who works for the some branch of the military, a pretty high muckety muck, and was getting pretty friendly with some of the people. And as he was kind of getting well known by moving up the ranks, they thought he might be in the know, so they decided to kind of tap him. And I got this clip. I wasn't going to play it, but since you asked, this is kind of like a connection between Hollow Earth and deep underground military bases.
People are taken into very dark, deep, what I would only call underground bases. I've had firsthand accounts. This guy was military, and he scored very, very high in the top 1 percentile of his class. And so he was being sort of courted by the brass. And one night, some high-ranking guy came and picked this guy up, and they started belting down the drinks, and one thing led to another. And they went on a 3 to 4 to 5 hour drive out in the middle of nowhere. And this gentleman found himself in an underground base below a mountain. And in front of him, he comes on the record and says it all. In front of him were the little grays that we all know, the big black eyes, the little gray aliens, and U.S. technicians working side by side. In the distance were these tall whites, which can only be described as some sort of an off-world entity. He freaked. And by the way, they were working on flying saucers, working on UFOs. Like most people, it was instant cognitive dissonance. There's nothing in his paradigm, nothing in his worldview, which allows him to process any of the information. He's just being slammed with all this stuff, and he's going like, what do I do with this? And he basically freaked and got out of there and didn't want anything to do with the program. He was being initiated into this very secret program. He didn't want anything to do with it. And of course, when he came down with that, they immediately did what I could only call damage control. Psychotropic drugs, quarantine, to basically break him. And this is like, decades later, he comes on the record, his face is completely blacked out, and I can see him shaking as he's telling me the story.
And what he's describing there sounds an awful lot like the Dulce underground UFO base that's rumored. Now, that came to prominence because of Phil Schneider, who did the UFO circuit back in the 90s. And Phil Schneider kind of had like a deformed hand, and he talked about a base in Dulce, New Mexico, where he was sent in to kind of root out. Well, he was part of a team. I think he was part of like the scientific wing or the recon side of the team into this base to kind of ask the aliens to politely leave, and they got into a firefight. So what was just described in that clip kind of mirrors what Phil Schneider was talking about, but also it's important to remember movies like The Mirage Men, where they specifically in that movie mention purposely planting disinformation within the UFO community, specifically Dulce, in mentioning Dulce, in order to throw people in the UFO community off the scent of legitimate U.S. secret projects. Now, Dulce could have a UFO base, and simultaneously the CIA or the NSA could have planted disinformation, or neither are true. But there's seems to be some sort of connection between deep underground military bases and Hollow Earth. Even going back to the story I referenced last year, where it was, you remember, Gretchen might remember this guy, a Native American guy who was a hermaphrodite who got drafted into the military, and his first job was working at Area 51, and they sit him like 12 floors below Area 51 to basically be the liaison between the humans and Hollow Earth people. And the Hollow Earth people asked the humans, hey, can you please stop blowing up your atomic weapons? It's really kind of shaking things down here. It's spilling drinks. It's, tipping over a lot of plates. People are very upset. I don't think we complied with that because we continued to detonate nuke bombs out in the desert for, a decade? But a lot of weird parallels with other people's stories. But it all comes down, as most modern conspiracies do, it all comes down to the Nazis. And the Nazis, they love Hollow Earth. They couldn't get enough of it. Hitler and his occult beliefs, and much of the Nazi occultists believe that the true origin of mankind was below the surface of the earth. And they tried like hell to get weird artifacts throughout history, to get as much knowledge as possible, doing expeditions all across the globe to really expand their knowledge and place a foothold on their interest. Here is just a little bit. Here's a clip about the Nazis and their interest in Hollow Earth.
But some of the most notable expeditions of the Hollow Earth seem to carry us into the realm of the Nazis in Antarctica. The Nazis were not only keen on obtaining the most powerful occult relics and manuscripts, but they were also emphatic in their search for the inner Earth.
The Nazis did have a vast interest in looking for an opening to a Hollow Earth. It was actually a prophetic part of their whole belief system, that they were destined someday to be reintroduced through an opening of the Hollow Earth to a pure-bred race that was part of what they were as being the diluted race on the surface. There was a purebred race. This goes back to Helena Blavatsky and her book, Secret Doctrine.
The Nazis knew through all of the arcane, hidden, and occultic knowledge that there were underground cities and civilizations still functioning in their power.
The Nazis knew about this stuff, and they did mount expeditions to travel the planet looking for artifacts, looking for talismans, looking for the old gods.
In 1938, the Germans began planning an expedition to Antarctica. At the beginning of 1939, a Nazi expedition finally explored what was at the time an uncharted area of the Arctic. By foot and by plane, the Nazis had surveyed a particular area that they were interested in, clearly with a secret agenda. They called it New Schwabenland.
Now, anybody kind of, even with a limited interest in Hollow Earth or like the Nazi conspiracies, know about Antarctica and Operation High Jump. So the Nazis set up a base called 211, and that was kind of like their foothold on Antarctica. Now, we fought the war, World War II, and we supposedly won. At least that's what the media told us. But, you know, after the war, there's Operation Paperclip. A lot of Nazi scientists and intelligence officers went to the United States of America. A lot went to Russia. By all accounts, a lot of Nazis escaped. Some went to South America, and some others went to Antarctica. That's the rumor. Like a lot of technology and a lot of high muckety mucks went to Antarctica. That's where Operation High Jump comes in, and Admiral Byrd. Now, just a limited kind of overview of Operation High Jump is that it was an exploratory mission with a bunch of ships. I think there's close to, 10 to 12 fairly large ships going down there, one aircraft carrier, I believe. And this was like 1946 to 1947, also called Task Force 68. Admiral Byrd was leading the charge, and by all accounts, there was some sort of conflict, some sort of scuffle, at least that's the conspiracy rumor, causing an immense amount of damage to the fleet. They did wind up going back, and Admiral Byrd is on record about going down to Antarctica and talking pretty openly about what he saw there. He was also pretty open about what he saw at the North Pole. Like, this guy has been to both poles, probably one of the few people ever to do such a thing. And he's like, yeah, I saw some stuff. So here's a little intro onto Admiral Byrd. These next three clips, they're a little long because it gets into some wild stuff. Here we go.
Richard Evelyn Byrd was an American naval officer who specialized in feats of great exploration. He was a pioneering American aviator. He was a polar explorer, and he was an organizer of polar logistics. He served as a navigator and expedition leader on aircraft flights in which he crossed the Atlantic Ocean, a segment of the Arctic Ocean, and even a segment of the Antarctic Plateau. Byrd claimed that his expeditions had been the first to reach the North and South Poles by air, and he was highly accredited and praised for these major accomplishments worldwide. It was in his lifetime that Byrd had amassed 22 citations and special commendations, including the Medal of Honor, which is the highest honor for heroism given by the United States. Byrd was one of only 4 Americans in history entitled to wear a medal with their own image on it. He was a national hero and explorer, awarded with notoriety even from the Smithsonian. Admiral Byrd was held to a high degree of respect in terms of the world, and he was highly regarded and valued by the U.S. government for a lifetime of accomplishments through expeditions and missions. Finally, he was on the cover of Time magazine, published on Monday, November 8th, 1926, as well as 2 commemorative postage stamps. And his expeditions were publicized greatly in the media of his day.
Our guest tonight found out whether there was any land north of the North American continent. He made that first discovery flight, and I must say that Admiral Byrd, our guest tonight, is not only our greatest living explorer, but he's been an inspiration to countless Americans. Admiral Byrd, you've been to both the North Pole and the South Pole. Is there any unexplored land left on this earth that might appeal to adventurous young Americans?
Yes, there is. And not up around the North Pole, because it's getting crowded up there now, because they find out it's really usable, not only to live in, but militarily.
So what we have here is someone who isn't exactly a Johnny-come-lately. We're not talking about a questionable conspiracy theorist, but rather someone with a lifetime of adventures and documented stories of expeditions that we only hear about or see in the movies. That being stated, a diary has surfaced claiming to be that of Admiral Byrd, documenting one of the most amazing expeditions to date. We're dealing with a man who was taken into the North Pole by UFOs and was forced to meet with the Inner Earth King, or the Master, if we're going by the diary's own terminology. No one can state it better than the words of the diary itself.
Now, I looked into it, and I can't find whether or not this diary is valid or not. But the next few clips I have are supposedly from Admiral Byrd's diary and what he encountered or had to deal with while dealing with Inner Earth higher-ups. It's also important to keep in mind that people like to visit Antarctica, especially dignitaries, whether it's Vladimir Putin, the Pope, John Kerry. Apparently, a lot of people like to go down there for whatever reason. Maybe they're there to check out the penguins. Maybe they're there to see a pyramid. Or maybe they're there to see old technology, a civilization that has long since faded away, or someone who is still there and demands their presence. But this next clip is supposedly from Admiral Byrd's diary as he's flying and doing some surveying.
February 19th, 1947. 0600 hours. All preparations are complete for our flight northward, and we are airborne with full fuel tanks at 0610 hours. 0910 hours. Vast ice and snow below. 0915 hours. In the distance is what appears to be mountains. 1000 hours. We are crossing over the small mountain range and still proceeding northward as best as can be ascertained. Beyond the mountain range is what appears to be a valley with a small river or stream running through the center portion. There should be no green valley below. Something is definitely wrong and abnormal here. We should be over ice and snow. To the port side are great forests growing on the mountain slopes. Our navigation instruments are still spinning. The gyroscope is oscillating back and forth. 10:05 hours. I alter altitude to 1400 feet and execute a sharp left turn to better examine the valley below. It is green with either moss or a type of tight-knit grass. The light here seems different. I cannot see the sun anymore. We make another left turn and we spot what seems to be a large animal of some kind below us. It appears to be an elephant. No, it looks more like a mammoth. This is incredible, yet there it is. Decrease altitude to 1,000 feet and take binoculars to better examine the animal. It is confirmed. It is definitely a mammoth-like animal. Report this to base camp. 10:30 hours. The external temperature indicator reads 74 degrees Fahrenheit. Continuing on our heading now. Navigation instruments seem normal now. I am puzzled over their actions. Attempt to contact base camp. Radio is not functioning. 11:30 hours. Countryside below is more level and normal, if I may use that word. Ahead we spot what seems to be a city. This is impossible. Aircraft seems light and oddly buoyant. The controls refuse to respond. My God! Off our port and starboard wings are a strange type of aircraft. They are closing rapidly alongside. They are disc-shaped and have a radiant quality to them. They're close enough now to see the markings on them. It is a type of swastika. This is fantastic. Where are we? What has happened? I tug at the controls again. They will not respond. We are caught in an invisible vice grip of some type. 11:35 hours. Our radio crackles and a voice comes through in English with what perhaps is a slight Nordic or Germanic accent. The message is, "Welcome, Admiral, to our domain. We shall land you in exactly 7 minutes. Relax, Admiral. You're in good hands. I note the engines of our plane have stopped running. The aircraft is under some strange control and is now turning itself."
So at that point in time, Admiral Byrd is brought down what is a tractor beam. Pretty much what he's describing, he was caught in a tractor beam by Germans, Nazis brought in to an underground facility. He was greeted, taken out of his airplane, and said, "Hey, someone wants to meet you." He is the ruler of this underworld. They call him the Master. And here is a bit of the conversation between Admiral Byrd and the Master, the Lord of the Hollow Earth realm, at least of this realm. And this is the last clip I got. Here we go.
But now, Admiral, I shall tell you why you have been summoned here. Our interest rightly begins just after your race exploded the first atomic bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan. It was at that alarming time we sent our flying machines, the Flugerods, to your surface world to investigate what your race had done. That is, of course, past history now, my dear Admiral, but I must continue on. You see, we have never interfered before in your race's wars and barbarity, but now we must, for you have learned to tamper with a certain power that is not for man, namely, that of atomic energy. Our emissaries have already delivered messages to the powers of your world, and yet they do not heed. Now you have been chosen to be witness here that our world does exist. You see, our culture and science is many thousands of years beyond your race, Admiral. I interrupted, but what does this have to do with me, sir? The Master's eyes seemed to penetrate deeply into my mind, and after studying me for a few moments, he replied, "Your race has now reached the point of no return, for there are those among you who would destroy your very world, rather than relinquish their power as they know it." I nodded, and the Master continued. In 1945 and afterward, we tried to contact your race, but our efforts were met with hostility. Our Flugerods were fired upon, yes, even pursued with malice and animosity by your fighter planes. So, now I say to you, my son, there is a great storm gathering in your world, a black fury that will not spend itself for many years. There will be no answer in your arms. There will be no safety in your science. It may rage on until every flower of your culture is trampled, and all human things are leveled in vast chaos. Your recent war was only a prelude of what is yet to come for your race. We here see it more clearly with each hour. Do you say I'm mistaken? No, I answer. It happened once before. The Dark Ages came and they lasted for more than 500 years. Yes, my son, replied the Master. The Dark Ages that will come now for your race will cover the earth like a pall. But I believe that some of your race will live through the storm. Beyond that, I cannot say.
And it basically gives Admiral Byrd the message, stop blowing shit up, and we will live pretty much in harmony. And Admiral Byrd said, well, I only have so much sway with our politicians, and I have no political power whatsoever. And so the Master said, well, you better do what you can. Put him back in his plane, and Admiral Byrd took off. And that was it for Admiral Byrd meeting the Master of Hollow Earth. And I'll wrap it up with this. Like, we know a lot of dignitaries visit Antarctica. They have an interest in it. We know that the World Economic Forum is, its mascot is a German accented, narcissist, power-hungry person. It just seems like the Nazis and that way of thinking, that style of ruling over people hasn't died out. And if all these stories are true about Hollow Earth and the Nazis' expedition and how they really did escape complete collapse, they very well could be exerting force today over political decisions just as much now as they did back then. And that the technology that they had, the wonder weapons were shuttled away. Some went over to the United States, maybe a few went over to Soviet Russia, but then a good deal of them went down to Antarctica so they could ally themselves with whatever is living down there. And that the early UFO flaps of the late 40s, early 50s weren't really UFOs or aliens from a different star system. They were coming from Hollow Earth, and specifically human-made UFOs, Nazi tech that was kind of aligned more with the Hollow Earth Master. Crazy, far-fetched stuff. but I love it.
Chinese spy balloon.
Chinese spy balloon. So what a wild tale, Hollow Earth and what lies below the surface. It's so fantastical. Like telling people that there's aliens from a different star system seems quite trite at this point. When you tell them that there is a king of Hollow Earth down there somewhere grabbing well-respected and known pilots to deliver messages back to the humans, that's even crazier. But that's where we're at. Hollow Earth. All right, Joe, I blabbered on enough. Do you got anything over there, or do you have any statements? You want to state your case, your piece?
No, I can
see
why show? Everybody was waiting with bated breath, though, for the Hollow Earth segment.
It's crazy. It's
riveting.
Craziness. It's craziness. And that's just a drop in a bucket. We didn't get to the lizard city of L.A., which was discovered when there was a push west in the United States. We didn't get to all the different locations of where you could enter Hollow Earth. We only touched on Operation High Jump a little bit. We didn't get into
how's the real estate market down there.
Oh, if you know people, if you got a realtor, you can get a good spot. But you got to know somebody who's accredited and certified to sell you stuff down there. It's the difficult part.
How is Lizard City bumping, or which is that?
I think it's.
If you say it's out west by California, I don't know.
Well, it's under L.A.
The curtains match the drapes over there.
Yeah, maybe.
Or the carpet matches the drapes, however they say it.
Well, the Lizard City was discovered, I think, in the late early 1900s when they were building out L.A. And we didn't get a chance to go into that or get into the Thule Society. It's a whole tangled web of mysticism and crazy stories from ancient humanity up till Nazi Germany to present day. It's just a crazy bag of stories. And I think that there's something there. It might not be exactly this, but I think that there's something there. And obviously the United States has deep underground military bases. And what they're being used for specifically, we don't know. But it's a fascinating.
I think the deep underground shit seems more believable. We've seen a lot of that evidence, and Lord knows, if there is anything Hollow Earth related that comes from something else, it's almost like that stuff you believe about alien tech being, scurried away or whatever the term is. Like they take it, hide it away, and do what they can with it. And yeah, there's no aliens. Shut the fuck up. And then they take it and reverse engineer it. It would be the same for Hollow Earth. If there is anything such as that, they'll just go take it for their own shit, Yeah,
it's tough to know what is UFO fan fiction versus disinformation put out there by the government versus actual genuine things. And it's just a fun topic to discuss and speculate
Give
about.
us an email at ourbigdumbmouth@gmail.com. Check out obdmpod.com for all the social media and donation links.